One. Hey, welcome to 2023 and a dispatch from Holly McKay. Today we're going to be talking about veterans, and we're actually going to be talking about Canadian veterans and apparently some issues that are surfacing north of the US border with regards to how things are going as far as the treatment of these guys is concerned. Holly, tell us a little bit more about this.
Well, this is a story that I started working on in sort of around November of 2022. And I'd read a little bit, and I'd seen a friend of mine, Kelsey, who was a Canadian veteran, and she had done an Instagram live about it and was really, very physically upset. And she'd been talking about how she had come across several other Canadian veterans that were suffering various different ailments, whether that be PTSD and depression or physical ailments from their time in service, and that they had contacted the Canadian Veterans Affairs and that they had been offered the option of the MAID program, which is Canada's basically it's a medically assisted suicide program. And so this had sort of come as a sort of very terrifying shock, I think, to a lot of people that this had been offered in any sort of way, shape, or form over the past several years, where veterans, people that had served their country, who were struggling, that this sort of seed had been planted into their head. And so I started to do a little bit more digging and spoke to veterans where this had been offered, and also to other people that were really digging into it, trying to find out whether this had become somehow part of policy in Canada to offer this service, and really if veterans had actually accepted it. And to my knowledge, one veteran had actually gone through with the program. But several others had come forward and said that they'd spoken to different case officers who had offered it, which was quite shocking. And I definitely thought it was something really worth looking into, and worth seeing, how kind of widespread this was. The Canadian government has responded to the uproar around it by sort of saying these were very isolated cases and it wasn't sort of part of any big policy. But I think more people are kind of coming forward. So there definitely are a lot of questions.
Yeah. So a little bit more about this MAID policy. Where do they come from, and how widespread is it in the Canadian health system?
So this has been in place now for the past few years, and actually, as of 2023, there were a lot of laws that have passed that have actually made it a lot easier to go through with the program. Basically, you just have to get two physicians to sign off from it. One of the really controversial aspects is there's a sort of a push to have it offered to children, where they don't even require parental consent to have it done. Also, one of the changes is previously it was a program where you had to basically be considered to be at the end of your life, so suffering some form of terminal illness, but that has now been loosened to also include mental illness. And so you don't necessarily have to have a hugely debilitating disease, in which assisted suicide could be considered to be kind of a dignified way to end your life, rather than having to go through several more weeks of extreme pain. So there's sort of a lot of loose ends around it, and this is it's such a irreversible decision, that people can basically get approval, and it can go through the process pretty quickly. So it's a lot of controversy around it. It is presented in Canada, and by advocates of it, as being sort of the ultimate bodily decision, ultimate autonomy over your body. But then, as other people have pointed out to me, that is quite hypocritical, because things like vaccines were mandated in Canada, and you had all sorts of other policies that can kind of throw that into debate over bodily autonomy. And so it is a big, it's kind of Canada really is sort of the several countries, including the United States, do have different degrees in different states of assisted suicide programs. But Canada really is kind of the global leader, if you will, in enabling people to go through that process.
Okay. So in the Canadian veterans that you talk to, um, are they, what's their reaction to this when they get told this? Is it, because it, to me anyway, it feels a little bit of a shock that, you reach out for help and somebody says, "Do you want to go kill yourself?"
Mm. I think, people are shocked. People are absolutely disgusted. They're absolutely heartbroken that this is even, being honored. And a lot of the times, as in the case with Christine, who I interviewed in the piece, she, she suffered a sort of she has a degenerative spine issue which she acquired during a training exercise where she jumped and landed sort of incorrectly, and has had sort of huge amounts of problems since then. And basically, she can't walk, and she's been trying to get an elevator in her house for the past 5 years. And the Veterans Affairs have been able to kind of give her the assistance she needs. So this, instead of basically giving people the sort of help that they need, this is being offered instead. So I think it's really infuriating for a lot of people who think, well, instead of actually going to the root of the problem, instead of giving the people, the veterans, the help that they actually need to overcome a lot of their physical problems, or even overcome a lot of sort of the mental struggles, they're offering them this way out. And I think that is extremely infuriating for a lot of veterans, that they're willing to kind of let people serve and die, and then not do what's right by them in that kind of aftermath. And so I would hope that the controversy surrounding it is a little bit of a wake-up call. But I also think it's an issue that needs to be looked at in other countries, including the United States, and what is being done to support veterans correctly. And, do we have veterans looking for these programs? And the danger of even planting that seed to somebody that is suffering from any sort of emotional fragility, I think is, as one person described it to me, it's predatory. And just in my personal opinion with it here, I think that it's a sort of thing that, if you want to go and seek that out, that is between you and your physician and your family. But I don't think this should ever be offered to anybody by a caseworker. I mean, the people that are allegedly offering this, they're not doctors, they're not physicians, they're not someone these people have personally had a interfacial relationship with. These are people on the other end of the phone that don't really have the know-how or the qualifications to be offering this. So I think that in itself is really concerning.
Yeah. So are these offers limited to veterans alone, or is this being offered to across the Canadian population,
Well,
as
it's
you know?
policy. It's a very strong part of Canadian health policy. So this is something that any Canadians can access if they want to. But again, that's sort of, I think legally, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe legally it has to be something that the patient goes to the doctor to discuss. The doctor cannot ever offer that to the patient. I mean, the initiative for something like the MAID program has to come from the person, the patient themselves, and it sort of can't be presented to them by a doctor as a potential health option.
Okay. So uh last question in terms of following up on this is what's, if anything, is going on with the Canadian veterans system that is changing that policy to conform with the patient has to be the one that initiates and not a caseworker thought.
I don't know that any specific reforms are going on. I think there's just been a lot of denials from the Canadian government. And basically, people that have come forward to say that this was offered to them have, in a lot of cases, been presented as liars. And that is a sort of traumatization in many ways. So I don't know that it's sort of being whitewashed and pushed away rather than, I think, dealt with on any formidable scale.
Yeah, well, sounds like there's something not quite right going on there then, because this is it's a bit of a shocker to me from a cultural and moral standpoint, and clearly to you and clearly to a lot of other people, but something to watch, because it's not something that I think it's not a really nice way to treat people, to tell you the truth, Holly.
Horrible, yeah. And I encourage people to go and read the article, and kind of goes into a little bit more detail about that program.
Yeah, okay. Well, um it's in a series of vignettes. This is kind of a bit of a disturbing one, and it's it happens to occur in North America. So, well, let's keep track of that one. Thank you, Holly, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Dennis.